What problems beset resemblance nominalism? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher's Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. Properties are entities that can be predicated of things. So these are things like 6'2", brown, large, round. Resemblance nominalism says that properties are not real things. They're not real entities. To say something has a property for resemblance nominalism is just to say that it is part of a class of things that resemble each other. Now, one thing that's nice about this is that we don't have to posit extra stuff in our ontology. We don't have to say that a lot of extra stuff exists. We don't have to say that these property things exist in particular. And that's nice. We don't want to say that there are extra things that are existing out there if we don't have to. However, it might be the case that we have to. So today we'll look at a few objections to resemblance nominalism, namely the companionship problem and the imperfect community problem. So first, let's put down some criteria that will solidify exactly what it is to be to have a property. So again, in resemblance nominalism, a thing has a property if and only if it is a member of a resemblance class. But what makes a class of things a resemblance class? The most obvious and standard definition is that a class is a resemblance class if and only if each member of the class resembles each other member of the class to some degree, and no non-member of the class resembles any member of the class to that same degree. So take, for example, the resemblance class wooden. This is a pencil, and it is a wooden pencil. What gives it this property, wooden, right? What makes it a wooden pencil is that it must be in the resemblance class of wooden things. And what makes that a resemblance class? Well, each wooden thing resembles my pencil to some degree, and no non-wooden thing resembles my pencil to that same degree. That would make it a resemblance class, and that would make it the resemblance class of being wooden. So those are the criteria by which we determine what the resemblance class is going to be. Now, the trouble is that these criteria lead us to two major problems: the companionship problem and the imperfect community problem. Here's how the companionship problem goes. Now, typically you're going to have properties that resemble each other in totally different ways, and that criterion too is going to keep them separate, right? So property F, it's going to resemble each other. That's criterion one. Property, let's say H, resembles each other, right? That's criterion one. And the two of them will not resemble each other, right? Stuff in property F will not resemble property H. So that will keep the two separate. But what if there's overlap? So premise one, assume that property F occurs only in particulars with property G. So for example, let's say, again, let's look at our wooden pencil. Pretend all wooden things were brown. I don't know if this color is brown. Let's just pretend that it was. Let's say that all wooden things are brown, but not all brown things were wooden. So there we would have a property F, a thing with property F that also has property G, but not all things that have property G also have property F. Two, each member of F resembles each other to some degree, right? That was how this had the property of wooden, right? Because it resembled all other wooden things. So F satisfies criterion one. 4, but the members of G resemble the members of F to the same degree, right? They all resemble each other. All the brown things also resemble each other in the same manner, right? They all, or to the same degree, I should say. 5, so class F does not satisfy criterion 2. Criterion 2 was supposed to keep the property F separate from other properties, right? But now we have this overlap. It can't keep them separate. And that seems to be a problem. It would make it to be the case so that you couldn't have wooden things. You could only have brown things, which seems absurd. Now, the most natural objection to this would be, but they don't resemble each other in the right way, right? So this thing resembles all wooden things in a wooden way and resembles all brown things in a different kind of a way, in a color kind of a way. So they resemble each other in different ways. But remember, the manner in which these things resemble other things, that's their properties, right? That's what their properties are. And properties, we're talking about resemblance nominalism. So properties are nothing more than membership in resemblance classes. That's all that a property is. And if that's all that a property is, if it's just being part of a resemblance class, then that is determined by your resemblance relations. And here our resemblance relations are such that the brown things have the resemblance relation that is equivalent to, or to the same degree as the wooden thing relation, right? So this resemblance relation sort of overpowers the other resemblance relation. So the whole point is, in resemblance nominalism, it seems like we don't have the ability to distinguish between one property that is a subset of things that have a different property. By the way, one thing to note is this is not the same thing as the coextension problem. This might be sounding familiar, but the coextension problem is something we talked about in class nominalism that would actually also be a problem for resemblance nominalism. But the companionship problem is not a problem for class nominalism. The companionship problem is more of a problem for the structure of the resemblance relation. The resemblance relation seems to have a problem, whereas class nominalism doesn't have a resemblance relation, so they don't care. Okay, imperfect community problem. First, let's review those criteria that we had. A class of objects is a resemblance class if and only if, 1, each member of class C resembles each other to some degree, and no non-member resembles a member of class C to that same degree. The imperfect community problem is a problem that meant to show that we could actually satisfy both these criteria and still not have a property. So this one is, if the last one was confusing, buckle up. 1, assume particular 1 has property I and property J. Particular 2 has property J and property K, and particular 3 has property I and property K, and assume that no other particular has any of those 3 properties. So let's say, for example, like we have something that is a wooden cylinder that is not red, then a red cylinder that is not wooden, and then a wooden red thing that is not a cylinder. And let's say that nothing else in the world is red, wooden, or a cylinder. That would be what we're talking about here. Each particular, notice, resembles the other to the same degree, right? The wooden cylinder resembles the red cylinder to a certain degree, because they're both cylinders. And the wooden red thing and the red cylinder resemble each other because they're both red. And the wooden cylinder and the wooden red thing both are wooden. So they all resemble each other to the same degree. So that means that our criterion 1 was satisfied. 4, no other particular resembles these 3 particulars. Because remember, we said that no other particular had these properties. So that means that criterion 2 is satisfied. But that means that particulars 1, 2, and 3 make up a resemblance class. And if they make up a resemblance class, that's a property on resemblance nominalism, right? That means that they are a property. And that's pretty weird. What property are they? Are they the IJ or JK or IK property? What kind of property is that? That doesn't seem like a property at all. So it seems like we would be seeing properties where properties don't exist, which seems absurd. Or on our example, we would have the property wooden red or red cylinder or wooden cylinder property. That would be like a property, and that doesn't seem like a real property. Some people actually think that everything is a property, so they wouldn't object to that. But for most people, they're going to say, yeah, that doesn't sound like a property at all. So those are 2 major problems given by philosopher Nelson Goodman. I have a couple of possible responses given by a couple of philosophers, and then objections to those responses, and then we'll call it a day. The first is by Gonzalo Rodriguez Pereira, And he wrote the book on resemblance nominalism. It is literally called Resemblance Nominalism. And it costs like $110, and I can't afford that, so I didn't read it. But I read his account summary in Sophie Allen's Properties, which was, I don't know, hard to understand. But his response to imperfect properties, imperfect community. Notice in our example about the red wooden cylinder, red cylinder, they each resemble each other, but the pairs of each other, if you made pairs of them, the pairs wouldn't match up. They wouldn't resemble each other. So if we had red cylinder, wood cylinder, right? That's a pair. And then if we had red cylinder, red wooden, that's a different pair. And if we tried to match those two up, now those don't resemble each other anymore, right? So the pairs won't match up. So Rodriguez Pereira, I believe, he says, what if instead of a resemblance relation, we looked to a resemblance star relation? So this would be a hierarchical type of a relation where we have this iterative type of resemblance where not only do the particulars have to resemble each other, but the pairs of the particulars have to resemble each other, and the pairs of the pairs have to resemble each other, and the pairs of the pairs of the pairs, et cetera, all have to resemble each other. And if we had that, then we would avoid the imperfect community problem. So he comes up with this R star resemblance relation, an iterative resemblance relation held between each member, each pairs of members, each pairs of members, etc. Now, this definitely solves the imperfect community problem. The only problem is it solves it at the cost of this bizarre relation, right? This resemblance star relation, which is very counterintuitive, and it's supposed to be a primitive, right? It's supposed to be something that we just take as existing. It's just supposed to be there. And the resemblance nominalist guys are supposed to be the guys that are very, like no extra stuff guys, right? They're supposed to be the very intuitive, kind of guys. So this is a pill that goes down pretty hard, like it's a hard pill to swallow. I think I totally am messing up my colloquialisms. But with this in place, he approaches the companionship problem, and he does so looking at degrees of resemblance. So he would say that two particulars resemble each other to some degree n, if and only if they share n properties. And since he's got this R star resemblance relation, R star must hold to degree n if and only if the relata of R star, which may be nth order pairs, share n properties. So in our problem where all f's are g's but not all g's are f's, it looks like then the f's would R star to a degree of 2, but the g's would R star to a degree only of 1. So the f's would R star each other to the lowest degree. And then seems like we can distinguish between f and g, which is great. The only problem is, seems like we're even less plausibly primitive here. Right now we have resemblance star to an n degree, which, like we were starting off with just resemblance. And resemblance is something that everybody understands, right? We seems like we see resemblance, but resemblance of an iterative resemblance, I don't. That's not a natural kind of a thing. Iterative resemblance to an n degree. Whoa. Seems like we're getting off the rails, right? So although it does seem like Rodriguez Pereira avoids these problems, for some philosophers it seems like at too big of a price. Another attempt to solve these problems is given by David Lewis, who is a very famous philosopher, and he says, what if the resemblance relation, we can make it, instead of a binary relation, just an n-ary relation, right? A relation between multiple different things. So he posits a resemblance relation R exclamation mark. where R exclamation mark of x1, x2, x3, so on and so forth, resemble one another and do not likewise resemble any of y1, y2, y3, so on and so forth. How does this solve anything? Well, just think, like, in order to resemble something, you really actually resemble everything. You have to resemble everything, right? All things will have to resemble each other in this one big relation. So they all sort of stand together. And that's it. Like and in order then to say, like, you couldn't say that two things resemble each other. You would have to say that, like, the whole thing resembles each other, right? All the things in the class resemble each other, and don't resemble anything else outside of that class. A big objection here is that seems bizarre. Like, resemblance does not seem like it has to be between everything, right? It should be a binary relation. Like, one thing resembles another thing, and it doesn't have to resemble all the other things. Well, I mean, it does resemble all the other things, but, like, it seems like resemblance happens between two things. Another objection is that this relation starts to get out of hand once you get bigger sets of resemblance things. So for those reasons, people don't really take this one seriously. If you found this a helpful video, please don't forget to support me on my Patreon page, link in description. Also, please let me know if you have any questions. This is the end of our resemblance nominalism video. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video. And I will see you guys in the next video. We'll talk about trope theory. I'll see you there. Adios.